Hello, Rise and Thrivers. Welcome to another episode of Rise and Thrive Together. Today is September 11th, I'll just ask that we take a moment of silence just to remember the event and those people that we lost, as well as the ones that were impacted by that loss. So please take a moment of silence with us. Okay, thank you. Here at Rise and Thrive, we are a vibrant community committed to you. We do this through educating, equipping, and empowering you to live the life that you want. And we are so glad that you're here. I know for those of you that are new to the show, I do not typically have such a sexy voice. So, but I do tonight, okay? So I will introduce my sister. I guess I was so excited to have our guests on the show. I probably was screaming all the time. I'm like, oh my God, there are going to be so many nuggets. And I'm going to stop talking because clearly I started to lose my voice in that one. But I'm so excited. Sis, I'm going to throw this over to you. Hey, Reg, how you doing? Love, love, love. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Please, let's get to our guest. I am like so stoked to hear what he's got to say.
I know. Guess what, Rise and Drivers? Before we get to our guest, Hal Eisenberg from the Leadership Academy and from Windows of Opportunity, just take a second, give some vibes, those healing vibes to our sister, Raquel Stuart. All right. Well, here we are on September 11th. I love words, and people use the word coincidence as like it's by accident. But if you break it apart, it means coincide, how two things perfectly come together. And Hal Eisenberg, and on this day of September 11th, it really does coincide just so beautifully. So let me share with you a little bit about Hal Eisenberg. He is the founder and the CEO of two organizations, the Eisenberg Leadership Academy and Windows of Opportunity. They were created to build world's first and most comprehensive education system for raising 21st century leaders and engineering a society that is going to support them. The Leadership Eisenberg Academy is designing a world and creating positive changes in the areas that most concern them by providing global platforms for youth. Its mission is to create and deploy innovative and impactful programs that shift the way we educate and empower youth. A shift from disempowerment to possibility, away from differences to acceptance, and away from limits to opportunity. Windows of Opportunity is a nonprofit agency that is essentially a series of community outreach initiatives built for youth by youth. It partners with kids and teens and young adults ages 6 through 24 to develop in school and after school programs, workshops, conferences, and curriculums for themselves and their peers. These programs form partnerships with local schools and districts and universities, community social service agencies, and its goal is to assist and empower our at-risk youth in designing, executing, and participating in positive leadership roles through social emotional learning initiatives and programs, workshops, and curriculums that address all the compartments of their life while building their self-esteem. He has had over 25 years of creating initiative programs. Hal has been accredited with implementing and coordinating events and raising over $500,000 for various charities. He has created programs for young people interested in developing their own self-expression through music and fashion and film. He has authored several age-appropriate leadership curriculums that range from kindergarten through fifth and then sixth through 12th and higher education platforms with the social learning activities that provide students with an expansive understanding of our ever-changing society. Hal's vision at the core is that the world becomes one healthy community through higher conscious education. The systemic approach he has built with his team promotes healthy communication to encourage trust-based relationships, which supports acceptance of each other and reduces fear to create an an expressive, open society that leads people to connect to and expand their souls through a high love consciousness, which help people live optimal lives and supports others for doing so well. He has been recently coordinating leadership programs in Haiti, Nigeria, Guyana, Kenya, the UK, and Canada. He holds a master's degree in social work from Adelphi University, a master's degree in social leadership from Touro College. He is a licensed master social worker in New York State, as well as a licensed school building leader. He is certified by the New York State Department of Education to provide violence prevention training to professionals under Project SAVE, Safe Schools Against Violence in Education. And he was awarded both the Evelyn Pellegio Social Work Student of the Year Award, presented by the Queen's President Claire Schulman, and the City Council citation by Councilman Sheldon Leffler in 2018. He's been awarded the New York City Department of Education School Social Worker of the Year for his tireless efforts in the largest school district in the world. He is also the board of directors for the Passion Center in Toronto, Canada, holding a certification as a passion-based expert. Hal builds and facilitates programs designed to support adults in working through their blocks, discovering and activating their passion and supporting the expression of their passion into the world. He has 4 books, their reality fiction series, and is beginning to be re-released, that's right, this fall, right now, that we're in 2023. And he's in the process of writing his 5th book called Social Emotional Learning. It's Not Just a Color Chart, due to be released in 2024. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Hal Eisenberg. Woo!
Wow. Thank you, Regina and Raquel, for having me on the show. Raquel, you are a trooper. Thank you for fighting through whatever you have. We're sending you like healing vibes.
Thank you.
I've actually never heard that bio like out loud before, and I was like, whoa. Like, is that me? Like, that's so crazy. It's amazing, like what you can, put together, in 25 years. So I can't even believe it's been 25 years. I also want to thank you both for that moment of silence. Regina, kind of hinted before that there's no coincidences, right? And everything in the universe aligns for a reason. And when you asked me to be on the show on September 11th to talk about everything that we're going to talk about, like there's a lot of beautiful stuff we're going to talk about today. I thought it was really, really like super amazing that we picked this day. So if you don't mind, I'll just tell you like a little bit of why, that's a coincidence, right? So, or not a coincidence, as I was saying.
Yep.
9/11 is probably, it's probably a major moment in my life that is the reason that bio actually exists. That day I actually lost my aunt. My aunt was a first responder. And a little bit of a backstory to that is my aunt was also probably my biggest hero in my life, and the one adult in my life that was actually like very like involved in my life in like building values and self-esteem and connecting with me as a young person who was completely lost in his life. I have a lot of crazy experiences and a lot of crazy stories. All that stuff is in the book, and we could talk about some of that. But my aunt was the one that was like reaching in and saying, you can follow your dreams. Now, my hair was twice as long, twice as greasy, and I didn't believe in myself. I didn't believe that I could create this dream. And my dream simply at the time was to build something, a program or a company that helped youth, because I wasn't being helped. I wasn't being helped by the school system. I wasn't being helped by the adults in the community. I was completely lost. I didn't have a voice. And I wanted to build a platform that gave people a voice, and I still didn't believe myself. When my aunt passed as a first responder, and she was just this amazing, beautiful human being, that became my catalyst. So in her memory, I created Windows of Opportunity. And since then, I've worked with almost 500,000, youth and families, tons of programs, and then the story goes on and on from there. But 9/11 always reminds me, we lost 3,100 people that day, and there's so many more people that are sick and dying from the fumes. But there's two things I want to make a point in before I hand it back to you two lovely ladies. The first, I could talk and talk. It's like a 1 hour show. Like, we can go on for 3. The first point I wanted to say is when they opened up the Freedom Tower, I went down with some of my spiritual friends, and we did a prayer and we did a meditation there. And one of the things that I became very, very present to, that I always like to share, is we always talk about the people that were lost. We talk about the families. We talk about the first responders, and absolutely we should. What they did that day was amazing. But something that was really clear for me is I thought about and I'll get some pushback for this, but I thought about the pilots that flew into the building and their families, and the representation of who they are in society, and how society brought them up to have those beliefs that they felt so important that they had to commit that act, right? And it makes me think about, where is humanity? How did we get there? And how do we elevate? How do we overcome that type of lesson, those type of struggles, which I know is your theme, right? And the other memory I wanted to share that. And the other memory I wanted to share, because, Regina and I will probably get into a little bit of our history, but 2 months after 9/11, Regina and I were actually at Ground Zero. And Regina was at a conference, and I had dropped her off at her hotel. And Regina, I'll never forget that day. 2 months after, her hotel window was looking down on Ground Zero, and there was still fire, there was still smoke, there was still burnt paper flying through the air. The smell was still there. It was haunting, and I just remember thinking, the universe wants me to see this, because this is what's going to power all this work through, power shows like this, Rise and Thrive Together, right? How do we overcome the pain of society and the pain that we feel inside, and move forward collectively as a planet? So that day, and this day, 9/11, always reminds me and brings me present to the work that we're doing.
Ooh. Wow. Yeah, I'm like taking a moment, because that was just one of the beauty of being a human being and having a voice is storytelling, right? Everything that we're coming out of our mouth is a storytelling. And so that was very vivid. So I remember that day, but like, you brought me back to that moment. And so, here on Rise and Thrive, we talk about that and how it impacts. He's sharing a story, and I have my heart's racing and it's tightening, and I've got tears. As a moment, it's back to that moment in time of such a moving forward. 2 months afterward, for a very specific conference, to see how Raquel, I didn't even realize how we can rise and thrive through such a traumatic time in life. And while it's still, I love what you said, Hal, about elevating, right? How do we elevate? And I really haven't spoken to you. We've known each other for over 25 years of, having that other perspective. This is, Raquel is really struggling tonight, right? Struggling, with the throat, she's just giving it a rest, what she needs to say. So I'm going to take away the struggle and she's giving her voice a rest, right? But to have that other perspective, and I'm interested from our viewers, right? Like, to have that perspective of, the planes that went in, and the people that, took, they made that choice, and they made very specifically on the values and the belief systems that they were brought up in. We may not agree on those values and belief systems. Let's welcome to the world of how many values and belief systems that we all don't agree on, and the impact it has. And I appreciate you bringing that up, because this is really where we can get deep, guys. We've had a lot of fun, these shows. We've had some deepness, but we got 30 minutes. But tonight we get to dive deep. And I'm just wondering from our viewers, if you heard that or not, what you heard that I just said. There's a lot that happens in life that we get impacted on every single day that does not match to our values, that does not match to our belief systems. And how does that impact us, right? Mindset. How does that impact us in the way we communicate with another? How do we communicate to ourselves? And then definitely, how does that impact our community? And tonight is such a pivotal moment, that where most people say a traumatic, tragic situation did not break the United States of America, did not break New York City, did not break, the capital, did not break those areas. It brought people together through that trauma, through that disruption, through all of that. People began to connect and rise and thrive. And I'm just kind of interested of some of our viewers, if they have something to say about that. And sis, if there's anything you'd like to kind of add to that.
Well, I don't know if it's really an ad, but I'd be interested in knowing, why is it that we can come together when there's something that on that magnitude, that scale, but on something so simple as supporting someone because of something they're going through, or if they've started a business, why do we struggle to support them during those times? But something on a big magnitude, we are running in to help out. Hal, what are your thoughts on that? See, that's why I was keeping quiet.
I think that's an awesome question. I think I think my answer is a little bit from my spiritual involvement through the years. I think intrinsically, at the end of the day, we're all about love, right? We have so many things happening in our lives that we get caught up. We forget we're trying to survive. We're raised to be in reactionary mode. We're not raised or conditioned to be in, let's take this love and be really, really present to it and put it out. But at the end of the day, we're all here to rediscover who we are, and we're all here to rediscover that love. So when a big trauma happens in the world and it shakes us, it's like, whoa, what's this about? Who am I? We just recently went through COVID. That was a huge trauma. A lot of us lost people in COVID, world in COVID, and it shook us. And then, we had to say, who are we? Together from the systems in place and take care of humanity. And I think when push comes to shove, we will. But the secret or the question is, how do we get to the point where we can do that in just our everyday experiences, helping our neighbor, helping the person that we come? How can we be present and be an energy of love all the time? Mm-hmm. And I think it comes down to a lot of factors, and I think that's a personal choice. But hopefully, we can challenge all our guests and everybody who watches this show and everyone that we cross our paths to be that. And it starts with us, right? So I try to show up as love everywhere I am. And I know that you both do the same, and hopefully it'll be that whole pay it forward, thing. They'll feel that love, and then they'll help somebody else feel that love.
That's beautiful. So let's get really down to you, Hal, right? And get into that. I love, Raquel and I love the surface stuff. And then our show is real talk. Right. So let's get real into real talk. You have this phenomenal, he's ready. You've got this a fantastic book called Beautiful Souls that was released a few years ago. And now you're really taking each, there's 4 kind of themes throughout the book of your reality fiction of your life, and taking now re-releasing them into more digestible / opportunities for us to really reflect on ourselves and our communities, really looking into that. So Raquel asked a really powerful question. You know, social worker you, social worker me, licensed mental health counselor her, you know, coaches, all this stuff. Yay, yay, we get it out there. But let's get into your life. Your life in the first part of your book, and will you remind the audience what the first book is called that will be released soon this year?
Yeah, so the first book is called The Becoming Beautiful Souls Part One. So just to give our audience a little bit of a backstory, people ask me how long did it take to write this book, and the quick answer is 2.5 years, but the real answer is it probably took 35, 40 years to write the book. And when I started writing the book, and I've always wanted to write a book, and so many people say they want to write a book, and part of my drive, and this is my drive in most things in my life, statistically, 95% of people who say I want to write a book or I want to write my story don't actually write it, don't actually release it. Only 5% do. So I was like, I want to be part of that 5%. I really want to tell this story. Plus, my story, I think, is pretty crazy. Of course, I'm biased because it's my story, but I'm like, I gotta share this, right? So when I first started bringing like everything together, and compiling it, I probably had, I don't know, 2, 3, 4,000 pages of journals and notes just going back, through that story. And the original version, not even the original version I released, was probably 2,000 pages, and I knocked it off to it was like 1,126 pages. Never writing a book before. I was like, oh, so what? People are going to buy that. People are going to want to read that. Now realizing it was as long as War and Peace, and all right. Sometimes I might come across like I have an ego, but like, who do I think that I could release War and Peace and people are going to actually want to read that, right? So I ignored the advice of everybody, my publisher, my friends. I was like, oh no, I just want to get it out there. I'm done. It took me so long to put together. I want it out there. I put it out there, it sold a few copies. And then I was like, you know what? I should have listened to everybody. So after speaking and doing some soul searching and trying to find some material to add to the book just a little bit, so people who bought the original, I decided to release it as a 4-book series, and really use it as a platform, as a catapult to have conversations like this, so that we can talk about struggle and life. And Beautiful Souls for me was honestly to get to where I'm going and where I want to go. I needed to tell this story. It was almost like a cleansing. I needed to kind of work through the struggle and the struggle and the stories and the things that I was telling myself about myself and who I am. I needed to work through that so I could find the golden thread through it, so that I could find out, what does it mean to truly be about love? What does love mean? What does spirituality mean? What does connection mean? What does family mean? What is this story about? Because I didn't want to be my struggle. I didn't want to be the trauma. So this book was that cleansing. So now I could say, okay, like I get it. So now let's move to the next chapter. And now I want this book to be that tool and that resource that I can work with in society and have these great conversations like we're having tonight.
So I've got to jump in here. I drank water trying to get my voice back. So Hal, what the hell is love? It's in your book.
Right.
You said I wanted the answer to love, and then all that stood out to me was love. What the heck?
Wait, even before you get to say what love,
Wait,
what
to this
love
one.
got to do, what to do with it?
Wait, Mary, you might want to stop singing that song so loud. You might want to lower your voice just a little.
We're not covering that on September 30th.
Wait, we do have some folks to shout out before you, Hal. I really want you to answer that. And tell us the title of your book again.
So the title is The Becoming Beautiful Souls Part 1. And we're releasing it the first day of fall, which is September 23rd. And the following books will be released on the first day of each season. So over the next year, we'll be releasing all 4 books and having many conversations about them.
So
I love
guys,
that
there on the
painting.
screen is what it looks like. That's the cover, right, Al?
That cover is amazing. So one of my former students painted that. It took over 100 hours
Wow.
of painting. It's layered. The lines alone took 50 hours. I'm just so blessed to, be able to work with so many talented youth, and then to empower them. They wanted to be on this project. So this was Fatima. She's a phenomenal artist. She's at University of Michigan now. So shout out to her, and thank you for painting that cover.
That's so awesome. That's amazing. Let's get to some folks. Hey, Adelia. Adelia says, hey.
Hey,
She actually said
Adelia.
hi. I said, hey. And she said it's the same thing for her with her first book. Adelia, does that mean you had a War and Peace book too? And hey, Susan.
Adelia,
Susan said,
we could share our pain with each other.
yes, just each other. Okay, 1,000 pages. Woo! I thought I had a lot to say,
The
but no.
Becoming is only 226, so we're good.
All right. Hey, Susan. You said, I think we do, in fact, help our neighbors, support new businesses, give to various communities. You think that while see this happening and see reports on the news about 8-year-olds doing, I guess that's special good.
Good
I
deeds,
can't.
especially like doing like
Good
doing this. Yep.
overall media treats acts of kindness as special reports, not major news, and that's what we see. Yeah, and they get like a little bit. They get a little 2-second snippet, but I'm glad that at least it gets talked about and it gets mentioned. It does spark a conversation. So thank you guys for sharing. Hal, don't forget. Oh, of course you have more than 1,000 pages, Adelia. Say
Wow.
word.
I don't feel so bad
Wow.
now.
That's called
Well, we're not
five-part
really
movie.
sure what Adelia is writing, but I know, just for you guys, give a little background about Adelia, give her a shout out. She is a writer. She helps people write their stories out there, and she has a bunch of books that she's writing and getting out there to be published. So I'm going to say that she's going, yep. That what it takes to really write something, right? Especially when it's
Mm.
so personal, and when it's especially your own struggle, and you still might be having some struggling as this triggers up some stuff, and finding those, like you said, golden threads, right? Like those golden
Yeah.
threads. Raquel and I talked about that last week when we started the first, this whole conversation of surviving, right? Like struggle. Sorry, Susan. Struggle to thriving. Surviving is a different topic. Struggling, just the beginning of it, is so much of our mindset gets stuck in the struggle. And I got the blessing to read Hal's first War and Peace version of Beautiful Souls. And, I'm part of a lot of his, part of that book. We have a long term relationship that, to weave those moments when you're growing up, and he'll share some of those struggles when when you're in the thick of it, like in the thick of it. For many people tonight, they shared with me, they can't listen to tonight. Tonight, they're still in the thick of the impact of then. And I just send that love, right? Like when you say, what's love, Raquel? It's being exactly where you're at and being able to say, okay, I got that, right? I'm sending you some love. If you need something, and they were just like, wow, just the fact that you got it, like, because they're in their own mindset of making themselves wrong, that they can't be here and listen and support. It's like, you need to be exactly where you need to be. Know you're not alone. Checking in to make sure, do you have some people? If it's, hard, how are you taking care of yourself? Because we also are very wired of, and guilty of trying to tie things up in a bow, right? Tie things up in a bow and come forward. I know I learned a lot from you, Raquel, like when we talked about you just, sharing your voice. I'm always about making sure you take care of yourself first. I know you well enough to know that you know that, but not everybody has that about themselves. And so I'm going to throw that back to you, Hal, like where in the becoming of this young person growing up, where is, give a little bit about the overall struggle and where are you becoming, finding those golden threads because you're struggling, and at the same exact time you're finding these moments that pull you up and help you rise and then get to that next moment.
So before I answer that question, Regina, I just want to first go back for 2 seconds, and we'll get back to the love question too, because I'm like trying to keep track of all the questions. First of all, I would just want to comment on Odelia and say, like, writing the book, and this is kind of part of the answer to your question, Regina, was emotional, right? Like, part of the reason it took so long is because reliving those stories and reliving it the way I was writing it brought tremendous wounds up that were not healed, right? So that was part of the healing process. So it is a very personal thing when you write your own story. And then I wanted to say hi to Susan and go back to her comment, because I think Susan really made a really, really awesome point. The news is very traumatic. I stopped watching the news, right? Because it's negative. And I have an amazing friend, Louis Cruz, that you should check out his podcast. His story is he worked for, we're not allowed to say, a very, very big TV network. And his job was on the cutting room floor of this TV station. And he developed PTSD from watching the trauma over and over and over and over again. So now he speaks out against major news outlets, and he talks about the importance of really trying to focus more on the good, right? You know, that's part of all of this. You know, when we were talking earlier about like how do we get through this as a society? Like, we have to learn how to keep focusing on the good. So I just wanted to touch base on that. So, Regina, back to your question about I think I forgot the question now.
Well,
How did you word that?
tell us about your struggle, because I want to know. I want to dive into this book as much as you can dangle a carrot in front of us. But can you tell us about a struggle
Oh
and
my
the
God,
weaving
yeah.
of the thread and the overcoming, if you overcame? Because that'll
Yeah,
be
I think, I'm very careful about how I tell the story, because I kind of want to preface this with the fact that I love my parents very, very much. My mom passed a couple of years ago. My father is upstate New York, and he's, battling Parkinson's disease. I love my parents very much. The book really the book opens up when I'm 17 years old. The prologue is when I'm 17. So it's one of those, like, I was actually trying to think of, like, well, if this is ever a movie, it'll be one of, like, it starts here and then we flash back to childhood. I don't know if it comes across that way. That was the goal. But there's quintessential moments in your life, so like 9/11 was one of those moments that doesn't come up to, until book 2, but when I was 17, and looking back at my childhood, like 17 was this quintessential moment of everything leading up to my childhood, became this horrific moment. And I was homeless at 16. I was, on the streets from my 16th birthday. And I went through a lot of emotional struggles with my family, and specifically my parents. And honestly, I think my parents loved me tremendously the best way they knew how. We're talking about a different generation than now. There was no ACS. There was nobody, overlooking. There wasn't these societal rules that people enforce. And I think my parents were victims of their own, upbringing, and it was like, generational anger and hurt and wounds and pains, and that affected me, and I didn't know how to work through that. So I experienced a lot of things in my childhood with my parents, as well as being bullied in school. And when I say being bullied, there's a story in the book where, a bunch of kids had surrounded me and took my head and smashed it into a stone wall, and they were calling me stupid Jew, stupid Jew. And that's a memory that, my head bleeding and, running home and not understanding what does stupid Jew even mean, and why do people hate me so much? Why am I so bad? Why am I so damaged? So I grew up thinking I was bad and I was damaged, and then going through the challenges I had with my family, and then being homeless led to the only way I knew how to cope, which was drugs and alcohol. and I became an alcoholic and a cocaine addict. And it's actually so weird for that to roll off my tongue, because when I say that, that's nothing of who I am now. It's like, wait, was that me? Like, I remember the stories, but like, there's been so much beautiful, thank God, beautiful growth, because we know so many people who didn't make it in the world. So the book opens up, where I'm driving, and the girl that I was seeing, may she rest in peace now. She's passed away, but the girl that was in the car with me, we got into a fight, because that's what happens when you're under the influence. You can't control your emotions. And I was on Long Island, and thank God she got out of the car in the fight. She just didn't want to fight with me anymore. And we were actually fighting over drugs, like who was going to have the last line, of cocaine. And she slammed the door, and me being this cool teenager, like, hit the gas pedal and jumped onto the highway. And it was the Meadowbrook Parkway. For those of you in New York know, the Meadowbrook Parkway goes into the northern state like this. And this is how I remember the story. I don't know if this is actually what happened, but as I was going around the curve, I could have sworn I saw a car on my right-hand side. I don't know if there was actually a car there, but it made me jerk the wheel. I kind of jumped, and I went straight into a cement wall. So head first. Yeah. And next thing I remember is I'm knocking on this person's door. They open up the door. It's like 2 a.m. in the morning, by the way. I knock on this stranger's door. They let me in, and they're giving me a cup of coffee. They're trying to sober me up. I go back out to the car, and I see like police lights. And I'm like, oh, I'm not going near the car. So this poor person, I go back to their house. I knock on the door again, and they open it up, and they sit me down. And I remember this distinctly. They sat me down, and they were like, you seem like a really good person. This isn't your life. You can have anything you want. And so the stranger was like telling me in the middle of the night, like, this isn't you. You look like a good kid. Like, don't let this be your life. I don't, know who the stranger is, right? But all I can say now, it was like, was that stranger like an angel to me, literally sitting me down at that point? It's like 2:33 in the morning, saying, like, you have a whole future. Like, you can do anything you want. A whole bunch of stuff happens the next morning. The car was my grandfather's. This is all in the book. But just to get to the point of the story, my grandfather, may he rest in peace, beautiful soul, like literally a beautiful soul, like never was angry with me ever until that day, because it was his car that I totaled. And and he picks me up, and he says, we're going to the junkyard where the car is, right? And there's so many miracles that happen between that moment and the next day. So we get to the junkyard, and we're in the junkyard, and the guy comes out, and he says to me, he goes, you were driving this car? And I said, yeah. And he goes, there is no way you could have survived this. And I looked at the car, and the front end was an accordion with the back seat. There was no front seat. Now, I don't remember getting out of the car. Now, it wasn't one of those moments where like, oh my God, I saw the light and the light said go back. It wasn't anything like that, but literally, I don't remember getting out of the car. I remember hitting the wall, and then I remember knocking on this person's door, and this person sitting me down and saying, you have a future. From that moment, I sobered up. I never had a drink again. I never did drugs. I still had a journey. I still had a journey of like struggles and figuring out who I am and who I was. But it was in that moment I was like, I must have a purpose. And I'm going to go on this journey and figure out what that purpose is. So the becoming is really me starting to become who I am, and really like figure that out, and then it goes into the other books, you know. And by the time we get to book 3, you know, book 3 is when I really get into education, and I start getting the experience of the education system and really, really developing, like, now I have purpose. And then book 4 gets really into the love and the stuff. So I can go into that whole stuff. I love talking about love. You asked that question, but that's basically the answer to your question, Regina.
And I started loving it. I mean, you know, it's a very interesting moment to say, when we have our family and whatever, like you beautifully said, your family was doing the best that your family was doing for what they know how to do. That is such a like a mature moment, right? And time, here we are as adults to be able to look back. And, you know, it's the strangers, right? Raquel and I have often talked throughout the show with other people that, you know, you don't know the impact you make in somebody's life. You know, you just don't. If you're passing by someone and you give them a smile, you may never have that opportunity to know what that, you know, what that was. And as Susan writes, now that's a miracle way beyond coincidence. So happy you made it, as Susan said. You know, however, there's that high, like, moment, that impact. That, you know, the girlfriend gets out, the impact happens. Somehow or another, you make it to a door. Any, you know, we can give a million scenarios of what we see often in movies, what we hear often from people, what I read, you know, what we look at, which is slam the door, right? Slam the door, get away. These amazing strangers, you know, and, you know, came and looked at you, a young 17-year-old, bloodied, and said, you look like a great kid, you know, here you go. And it's the beginning of that mindset, that shift from there's something wrong with me, I'm broken, you know, whatever, to, you know, that. And then of course the person in your life, your grandfather, to be able to show you the car, and the guy showing you at this moment, you couldn't have made it. And here you are, another loving person in your life, your personal life, that reminded you, you know, and the guy being able to show you. Not everybody has this kind of huge moment in life. And so I'm going to throw a question at you because time is flying. We're already 43 minutes into this.
Before you throw him a question, can I jump in?
Yeah, please.
Hold your question 1 second. Excuse me. So what stood out for me in that story is that you took responsibility for your part, which was the drugs, the alcohol, crashing the car, whether you remember or not. You took responsibility and you decided, you chose, I'm going to choose me, and I'm going to get on the journey that's meant for me. Because that wasn't supposed to go left so fast. It wasn't supposed to be the end of you, because you have this journey, because you have your story to tell and your message to share with the world. So I want to say thank you for taking responsibility and changing your life, you know. And yes, the people there were great, but we often have people in our lives who are there, and there are cheerleaders. I mean, they have the biggest pom-poms, the loudest voice, but none of that matters if we don't choose to make that change.
And I felt like that moment, and Regina read the whole book, the original War and Peace version. And one of the things Regina had said to me, and this is kind of like a little hint, there's a character that appears in book 2, and I tie that character, because writing the book, like I said before, was healing these wounds and bringing all these wounds to the surface. And I keep going back to that moment. When I was writing the book, I kept going back to that moment. It was such a quintessential moment for that person to open up the door and invite me in, a stranger inviting a stranger in. And I really felt like it was an angelic moment, you know, and that's kind of how my soul and my brain can comprehend what happened to me. So, you know, I called the book a reality fiction because even though it's 90 to 95% my life story and true stories, I needed to wrap that angelic moment and weave it through the stories. So there's a figure that appears that I feel so blessed that this character was developed. It just, the universe is so magical. Like when you're writing, you never know what's coming out. Develop this character that connected that moment. So that's why the prologue opens up with that story, because that character then pops up in many sections of the book. And Regina said to me, "Oh my God, who's that character?" And I won't give it away, but when we come on in December and some people have read the book, we can talk about that.
Awesome. All right, sis, what's your question? Sorry.
So no, don't ever apologize. No apologies. That was,
I take it back.
beautiful.
I don't apologize, but you
Thank
can
you.
still ask the question.
Thank you. I'm like, thank you. I'm like, who was that girl over there? I'm like, no. So we're gonna go, get to the deep, real talk. So, taking responsibility, right? You were like, hey, you took responsibility. Let's look at the audience here, and people that are listening, because a lot of people are going to hit the replay and share this with people in their life. And many people can relate to definitely that 17-year-old, so we've got young people that listen, because you work with a lot of young people. I do too. And, adults. How? You had a very quintessential moment. So what can you kind of, give in, your golden nugget moment of how do I take that responsibility? What is it? What, and I know we can't tie it up in a bow, but what could you kind of explore and start talking about with people that are kind of in that kind of, brokenness, in that kind of really tough, struggle back and forth? What can you kind of say that maybe can help them kind of start weaving through some of that place so that they can start tapping into themselves?
That's an amazing question, and I have a lot of responses. I think first of all, we need to remember that struggle doesn't discriminate. We've all have been there, right? We all have a story, and I'm always a big fan of the saying, "There's a story behind the story," and I think if we can remember that when we work with other people and when we look at ourselves and our situation, we are not our brokenness. And I think we don't talk about this enough, and we're definitely in schools not teaching our youth about power and light and the ability to overcome, and that they matter, and that it's not about the test, and it's not about the grades, and it's not about the attendance. It's about so much more, and that everybody is a gift, right? But Regina, your question is strong. I'm talking what people might think when they first hear that is oh my God, it's a bunch of woo-woo crap. Can I say crap on here? Sorry. It's a bunch of woo-woo stuff, right? And do we do the beep beep? How do we get into the juice, and how do we remind ourselves, and I think there's a couple of things that we have to keep in mind. We have to realize, especially when we're looking at our personal struggles. One is we need to come to a point of acceptance, and we need to teach people this, that there are going to be challenging situations. Bad stuff is going to happen, right? That's just the way it is, right? Now the question becomes, are you willing to choose how you're going to react to that? Right? We can all be victims to the stuff, or we can say how can I grow from this? What is this teaching me? But we're not teaching people resilience, right? We're not teaching people that they have the skills to overcome, right? We're not teaching people. There was a study done. I forget what the study was. They did a study on gratitude, right? And they had people for 6 months focus for a few minutes a day on 3 things that they were grateful for, 3 different things every day. And what came out at the end of the 6-month study was depression was decreased, happiness was increased, productivity was increased, right? Just from thinking about things you're grateful for, not not the problems, right? And making that conscious choice. And there was something else I wanted to say to that, Regina, that was so important. That, oh yeah, that was it. I think we need to teach people that when we react to something, whether it's physically, emotionally, or mentally, if we could stop for 1 second and say, will this help me or will this hurt me? Will this thought help me or hurt me? Will this action help me or hurt me? And if it's going to hurt me, maybe I should choose different. And what that does is not only gives you a choice, but it puts you back in control. Because the problem with challenges is we think we're out of control. We think something external is affecting us, right? But it's external, right? We forget that we have all this power inside and that you are in control and you don't have to let it stop you or affect you, right? So I think that would be my answer to that question.
Oh my gosh. I knew there would be nuggets, and I want to go wild, but I absolutely cannot because I need my voice to talk and get my message out to everyone else. If y'all missed that or y'all chose to miss it, I'm going to say it again, and you can't ignore my voice. We need to come to a place of acceptance. Hal did not say, well, what that person did to you was wrong. He didn't say that. He said, we need to come to a place of acceptance that crap happens. I said crap to support you.
Thanks.
2, he said, before we react to stuff, we need to stop for a second and ask ourselves, notice the responsibility, ask ourselves if this thing will help us or hurt us. Accept and respond. I'm going to sum that second point up about before we react. I'm going to tell you what you do. You respond. Don't react to situations because that's emotional and there's no thinking in there. Respond is what Hal is telling you. 2 words. I'm going to make it short. Accept and respond. That's so powerful. All of that is not to give you work to do, but it is for you to take back, as Hal said, control. Right? Did y'all get that? If you
Amen.
didn't, it's because you're choosing not to. See, I'm the one that's going to tell you voice or no voice. It's because you're choosing not to. But the reality is you can't change what happened to you. None of us can. And we all do have struggles. Struggle is very, very real. Let me tell y'all. Regina, Hal, and I have struggles still. We are not struggle free because we are social workers or coaches or any of that stuff. It doesn't matter. There's always going to be struggles. Here's the thing. Hal gave it to you. Are you going to accept? And how are you going to respond? Because that thing, when you react, is it helping or is it going to hurt? That's a conversation you have with self. Sorry, I had to jump in. But
That's
now,
okay.
in the time that we have left, I want to hear about this Eisenberg Leadership Academy. We didn't even touch on that. And
Oh my God.
we definitely need to, because that title, that name is so powerful. When I hear it, I hear you're building leaders. And that is absolutely what we need.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for saying all of that. Yeah, and I just want to add one more thing. Like, every challenge is an opportunity to grow. That's my mindset, right? And it took me a long time to get to that point. But like, when I'm hurting or I'm struggling through something, I've got to stop myself consciously and say, how can I grow here, right? So the Eisenberg Leadership Academy, I know we're running out of time. So it's a passion-based business, and it's licensed as a passion-based business. It went through a tremendous amount of training through an organization in Toronto called the Passion Center, which I am a firm believer that every every organization, every visionary should go through that training, because I was running windows of opportunity, from after 9/11, straight through the currently. But when 2016, 2017 hit, I hit a wall. I was running tons of programs, and much of this is in the books, but I was just operating in a broken system, and I felt like I was in boot camp. I felt like I was getting my butt kicked, like just hitting walls and systems, and trying to inspire youth and build programs and platforms for youth to express who they were. And we've had incredible, amazing programs that I feel so blessed to have been a part of. And it's really not my credit at all. It's like I just built a platform, and the youth created it. So a lot of the programs that get credited to Windows of Opportunity is not me. It was the youth and the team of adults that supported the youth. So I don't even want to take credit for Windows of Opportunity. But when I hit that wall, I felt like I was stuck. And I needed to up level, and I needed to work through that stuckness. I needed to work through what I was blocked in. I needed to get unblocked. So I was soul searching and praying for answers. And that's when I came across this organization, the Passion Center. And through going through their programs, I ended up getting a lot of clarity and created the Eisenberg Leadership Academy, which really honestly is my life mission now. And my life is I realize I'm on this journey to transforming education, which is tremendous, right? Like, I felt like I could be in the trenches forever, but what do I really, really want to do? I want to transform the system. And I feel I walk into my life every day, and I started with like, what's possible? What can we really create? And I was tired of people telling me, Hal, you're an idealist. It's just not going to happen. And I'm like, well, the greatest things in the world happen when people were told it wasn't going to happen, right? So I want to play that game. I want to be on that level. So I created the Eisenberg Leadership Academy. So right now we've created an entire framework, of visionary ways to transform the education system. I'm consulting with schools. I've written tons of curriculum with myself and my team, and we're looking for ways, and we've created ways, from data analysis tools to curriculums, to really increase the social emotional needs of our youth. And not only the youth, but the system that supports them. So part of the vision of the Eisenberg Leadership Academy is I go back to the 13th century, and in the Middle Ages. I think about the Catholic Church, in how the Catholic Church was the center of society. And the Catholic Church, was involved in everything, family, community, politics, medical, everything came from that central thing. And obviously we know, without getting into religion and stuff, how the Catholic Church kind of lost its power like through the years. Well, I'm thinking, like, what's the center of society now? What is the catapult, or what should be the catapult to transform the other systems? And it really comes down to education. Like, if we can get education right, if we can teach youth that they matter, and that their voice matters and their ideas matter, and we can light them up inside, right? Then what happens is they will now go out into society as a domino effect into those systems, and they will transform those systems, right? Because that's the only option we have left. Like, we can keep spinning as a world, like, I know we're just one person on a mound of dirt that's spinning in the middle of space, right? Let's put it into perspective, right? But like, so it's not that serious, everyone, when you think of it that way. But if we're going to up level and raise the bar, for our planet and move it forward, we've got to start thinking about how we're going to do it. And it's got to be rethinking education. So I created the Eisenberg Leadership Academy to be a force behind that. So that's my ultimate dream and vision. That's what TELA is all about. Yeah.
Wow. Let me say this, Odelia, we're running how to get in touch with Hal. I see your comment, me too. I suggest you get in action, and you should already be sending Hal an email or a way to contact
Adelia,
him.
let's write some books together.
No, not you two. I'm going to separate y'all in the sandbox right now.
3,000 pages.
Adelia, I say it again, get in action. Just don't talk about it, but the action with it, okay? Hal is he's our premier sponsor. We thank you so much, Hal, for your sponsorship, and it shows how you feel about this program. Thank you for coming on and giving us nuggets about struggle. You guys, Hal, run the name of your book again because we're going to pour it into them.
It's
What's the name?
It's the Becoming Beautiful Souls Part 1. It's being released September 23rd. I'm so excited about it. Please, if you're interested in buying a copy, it's going to be super cheap. Oh, and all the money from the book is going to the youth charities. So none of that money is going into my pocket. We're just going to keep pouring it into society.
Where can they purchase it? Amazon,
It's going to be
BarnesandNoble.com, all of
it's
that?
going to be on Amazon. There'll be links on my website and everything. So, and on all my social media. So that'll be coming up this week, the links.
I love it. Remember, guys, come to a place of acceptance before we react. Stop and ask if this thing will help me or hurt me. Hal, thank you again from Regina and I. We appreciate you so much. Hal will be back in December dropping more nuggets. My voice will be better, so now I get to scream. We want you to really and truly take what he said and put it to work. And remember, together, we can rise and thrive. Till next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.